in this opportunity to highlight the important work Switzerland and Peru have been doing during the last 2 years. Our countries have been engaged in a very constructive dialogue, which reflects in the agreement signed between our countries on October 2020. This agreement, the first of its kind, reflects the propositive nature of both countries to make progress on concrete examples to address issues related to Article 6 under the Paris Agreement. This agreement represents a first step to move forward in a climate action considering core issues, environmental integrity, avoiding double accounting, respect of social and environmental safeguards, all in support of sustainable development in Peru. We will continue working together in this important partnership implementing the agreement to address the different challenges facing climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'm now very pleased to invite Veronica Elgar to present. Veronica is Deputy Head of International Climate Policy at the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment and has been one of the early movers in implementing Article 6. So over to you, Veronica.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, distinguished excellency, and participants. While the negotiations are still ongoing, it's a pleasure to inform today on what has already been achieved under the Article 6. And indeed, the Article 6 is already alive. We see here the wide panel with various stakeholders participating, and they all turn Article 6 into action. I myself will focus on the bilateral agreement between Peru and Switzerland, which will of course be complemented by my colleague from Peru, who may also inform us what it entails at national level. About 1 year ago, Peru and Switzerland signed the first cooperation agreement under the Article 6. It sets the framework conditions under which seller and buyer can engage. In a nutshell, it enables the creation of ITMOs, the Paris-aligned carbon units. These ITMOs can be used for NDC achievement or for voluntary climate objectives of any public or private entity. And the agreement provides the legal certainty needed for project owners, investors, and buyers to engage in cooperation under the Article 6. So in operational terms, any public and private entity can request authorization with the governments of Peru and Switzerland for the international transfer of mitigation outcomes. Both governments check on what's being suggested. If it is eligible, then both governments are legally obliged to follow up through bookkeeping on both sides, the so-called corresponding adjustment, to ensure no double counting. We expect this to happen before an activity is implemented to provide legal certainty and enhance investment security, and thereby unlock the investments for climate protection projects. To both governments, Peru and Switzerland, I think it's fair to say it has been very important to set high standards for environmental integrity and sustainable development. In a very nutshell, the mitigation outcomes we will recognize are strictly not double counted or claimed from the first day of our cooperation. We only recognize mitigation outcomes that would not have occurred otherwise. They need to be additional. Only mitigation outcomes from the year 21 onwards are going to be recognized. And if various sources of finance come into the game, attribution will be done. And finally, very dear to us as well, the host country is positioned through this framework agreement to guide the investments to activities with the maximal benefit for local communities. On this slide, you see in some more details some of the key standards that we have set. Let me just highlight two more here today. It is about the attribution to various financial sources that needs to happen. This allows the Article 6 cooperation to work in synergy with domestic policies, with international climate finance, without undermining one or the other engagement. And also, human rights have been strongly incorporated in the cooperation. In case of evidence, any transfer will be suspended under the agreement. Just very briefly on Switzerland's engagement on this, Switzerland has formulated an ambitious NDC beyond the effect of its strengthened domestic policies. The NDC of -50% by 2030 will mainly be achieved domestically, and the national legislation is under development. This means that are being mobilized for the purchase of ITMOs are additional to Swiss international finance, so I truly believe it's an enhanced contribution to solving the climate challenge. And we're creating demand for ITMOs, and we're providing legal frameworks for the use of these ITMOs towards any sort of mitigation objectives, and we aim thereby to unlock investments and implement the associated co-benefits. We'll hear from the KliK Foundation later on this panel today, who I'm glad to say is already starting to turn this into action. While the KliK Foundation operates towards the NDC of Switzerland, there is this other opportunity in the agreement between Peru and Switzerland to create and use these ITMOs for voluntary mitigation objectives. We strongly believe this is an opportunity for the global climate, for all actors involved, because every ton that is not double counted helps to contribute to closing the gap to 1.5 degrees. And with this, I would like to hand over to my colleague.
Thank you very much, Veronica, and good afternoon, colleagues. Good morning to colleagues joining also from Lima, from Peru. Definitely for us, as our Vice Minister mentioned, the agreement is definitely important and is part of what Peru considers is a creative approach, an innovative approach in order to address different climate action on the ground. So I would like to share some ideas and some progress that has been made in the country, in Peru, related to this agreement and in overall to Article 6 implementation. So first of all, let me just set up the stage relating to the national and international context. In Peru, we have a national framework, which is the climate change law and its regulations, which definitely set up the basis to advance and to make progress under these issues, especially those related to including different stakeholders in climate action. Part of this work is related to establishing clearly that the governance structure or the institutional arrangements related to this process, especially related to establishing the importance of the different sectors and their administration related to this process, as well as the mandate given to the Ministry of Environment related to this process, that is the one that approves the transference of climate change mitigation outcomes related to Article 6 or to this process. We also are part of the San Jose Principles on High Ambition and Environmental Integrity for International Carbon Markets, and we believe this is very linked to what the process that we have been moving forward with the government of Switzerland related to this agreement. So, in overall, maybe, and not to repeat what Veronica has mentioned already, this agreement is under the framework of the Paris Agreement, and definitely that for us is very important because it gives us it puts both countries on the forefront of implementation, discussing the challenges that we will be facing, and not only Peru and Switzerland, but many countries will be facing in the implementation and learning by doing in this process. The agreement establishes a framework for further on developing commercial agreements related to this process, and is consistent and will be looking for consistency with the national legal framework. As I mentioned, we have the climate change law, but are currently also working on specific regulations to address the necessary procedures to make progress on this work. Also, and I would like to highlight what Veronica has already mentioned, this is very linked and is important because it implies working on an overall goal of sustainable development based, obviously, on environmental integrity and respect to human rights. As we have mentioned, and I would like to highlight as well, this is a joint design. It has been a process that we have engaged in 2 years, and that definitely reflects the innovation and the support that both countries are moving forward in this process. As has been also mentioned by my colleague, we are working also on national procedures to implement this agreement, and in order to have a clarity over this process, and definitely safeguards, both environmental and social safeguards are part of this issue, of this process, and also it's important to highlight the alignment with our NDC. This is how our National Registry of Mitigation Measures looks like. This has already been launched, and we are currently working on the specific procedures to grant or to give legal security over this process, which implies predictability to all stakeholders that would like to be engaged in the process. This is a work in progress and includes a multi-sectorial approach, considering the different mandates that different sectors have in Peru. So what is the role and the importance of this national registry? Well, as I mentioned, it gives the legal security. It will set the procedures for assessment and the authorization of project activities. It will ensure transparency and a robust accountability of emission reduction units. It will allow us to do our monitoring, review, and verification of these mitigation measures, and will also address social and environmental safeguards that are definitely of a lot of importance for a country so diverse and multicultural as Peru. So this is what I wanted to share. In overall, as I mentioned, we are working on these procedures right now, and we are definitely will be engaging with different stakeholders in a participatory process to continue working on the procedures and granting legal security and clarity and predictability over this process, ensuring environmental and social safeguards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Milagros, and thank you, Veronica, as well, for your presentation. We've heard now from 2 governments, and we're going to move now to Margaret Kim, who is Chief Executive Officer of Gold Standard, to provide a perspective from a standard who is looking at how they can support Article 6 activities. So over to you, Margaret.
Thank you, Hugh, and thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for His Excellency Vice-Minister of Peru for his opening remarks. So we're very honored to be part of this session, as well as working with partners and governments who are trying to pioneer the way, raise the bar in operationalizing, not only agreeing on Article 6, but operationalizing Article 6. So we're very much honored to be part of this ambitious group. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Gold Standard, we're a global standard, a non-profit global standard that's been operating since 17 years ago. And at this COP, I have seen a huge amount of finance being pledged by so many different stakeholders, including government, private sector, private financiers. And our role as a standard is to make sure that this financial flow brings credible impact at the end, and that's also applied to the Article 6 transaction and the partnerships and bilateral agreements. So we've been operating for 17 years with the SDG at the heart of all of our projects, and we've developed more than 30 plus methodologies across land use, forestry, energy, and community services. And so before I move on to the voluntary carbon market or the carbon market in general, I want to step back and reflect on what's happened, because there's so much that's happened in this year. So first, this year on record, it's going to be that the value of VCM is set to exceed $1 billion. The Task Force on Scaling Voluntary Carbon Market has really tried to establish the key foundations for the market to scale in coming decades. And of course, we all know that scale comes with more scrutiny on integrity. So as we move on to scaling the market, a number of initiatives are seeking to raise the bar for quality and improve transparency, including the Voluntary Carbon Market Integrity Initiative. And at the core of what we do at Gold Standard sits in developing countries where the vast majority of our projects take place. But the voices of governments and stakeholders, the local farmers associations, too often go unheard. So one of our fellow standards in the voluntary carbon market created a global initiative called VCM Global Dialogue to address some of these challenges. And also, a carbon credit used responsibly can definitely enhance the ambition. But if it's misused, we've seen a lot of criticism that's being targeted for the market. If it's misused, then it can't replace the direct abatement responsibility of the companies. So the Science Based Targets Initiative has this year provided some important answers to those questions: when and how carbon credits should be used, and as companies transition towards their net zero. Finally, and probably the most relevant to this event, is the issue underlying all of this, the transition from Kyoto to Paris era, and what this means for the carbon markets going forward. So at Gold Standard, we see two spaces where carbon markets can act in a Paris context. First is helping countries to achieve their NDCs when credits are not accounted for under Article 6. This can help to achieve NDC targets and is compatible with certain uses of carbon credits, including new financial models in the voluntary carbon market. And second is going beyond the NDC of the host country through Article 6. So we're getting ready to make both spaces possible at Gold Standard. So in the near future, all our carbon credits will be aligned with core principles of the Paris Agreement. And we hope to expect that requirements of the new governance body set up by the task force will also lead to that. Some of these credits will be authorized for use under Article 6, some will not. And whether or not they're authorized will determine how they can or they should be used. You will see here that the distinction is not between compliance and voluntary market anymore, but based on the authorization status of a credit. So we're actually seeing a much blurry line between different market segments, but really seeing a merging market going forward, or integrated market going forward. So a credit authorized under Article 6 may be used by a country, but could also be used by a company to offset its emissions. Meanwhile, a credit without an authorization could be used within its domestic market, such as the South African carbon tax, or could be bought by a company as part of its climate responsibility. So there are several steps we're taking to prepare for this future with our government partners and NGO partners and project developers, alongside the ongoing Article 6 negotiations. First, we're beginning to align our rules with Article 6 and the Paris alignment, which will step up following the outcome of COP26. And we're setting up an expert group of independent advisors to support us on this journey from all geographies and backgrounds. Second, we're introducing a new process to manage credits authorized under Article 6 and to avoid double counting. And this will involve new relationships with host governments like Peru, cooperating in ways that have not been seen in the past. So we're very excited to enter into partnerships to support the host governments. And thirdly, we are providing support for our project developer community as well as our host countries to make a reality of this new normal. And we're seeking expression of interest now in our new early mover program, which will kick off next year. And finally, and most importantly, we're building partnerships across the world to enable ambitious market-based action through digital tools and platforms. And our role at the end of the day will be as a facilitator. And we want to partner with buying countries like Sweden and with host countries to help them raise ambition through Article 6. And just to conclude with three main messages. One is we cannot forget that the underpinning theme of this conference is to keep alive the 1.5 degree temperature goal. So buying carbon credits counted towards a host country's NDC can definitely help to achieve that NDC. And in order to claim that is only by buying credits authorized and adjusted by the host country under Article 6 that a company can support ambition beyond the level of current NDCs and really help narrow the gap to 1.5 degrees. And we believe this is a crucial role that a scaled-up voluntary carbon market can play. And second, we're already seeing signs that we're moving away from distinct voluntary and compliance market and towards one integrated market that is used for different purposes. And gold standard should be used by governments like Sweden, Switzerland, or airlines, Corsia, and companies and individuals, and decide how this carbon asset or carbon credit will be used in different contexts. And finally, we cannot forget core principles that must underpin the market as it moves forward: climate justice, inclusivity, integrity, and the promotion of sustainable development. These will remain at the heart of Gold Standard's work as they have been for nearly 2 decades. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Margaret. In essence, the 3 presentations we've just heard from the governments of Switzerland, Peru, and from Gold Standard are all really about establishing the frameworks for high integrity cooperation under Article 6. But those frameworks rely on others to translate them into real world activity. And that's where our panelists come in today. And we're very pleased to have with us in person Misha Klassen, Director of Carbon Procurement at the KliK Foundation, based in Switzerland. And joining us virtually, 3 other panelists: Katrina Oswald, Senior Manager for Nature and Climate at WWF Switzerland; Jan Husser, who is responsible for the Coop Fund for Sustainability; and then finally, Florian Eichhold, Climate Finance and Environmental Manager, Environmental Markets Expert, at Atmosfair. And with these panelists, I think we'll have a diverse set of experiences of actually applying Article 6 on the ground and looking at Article 6 from a different perspective to those that we've heard from so far. So Misha, I'm going to come to you first. The KliK Foundation has the challenging job of identifying enough emission reductions from enough high-quality programs to fulfill Switzerland's NDC requirements. And you've got a lot of experience in the carbon market. I'm interested to hear from you how working under Article 6 compares to working in the market in the past under Kyoto.
Yeah. So thank you for this question. I mean, this is the key question. I think there are a lot of resemblances and common ground. I mean, the whole methodologies that have been developed under the CDM, they still are valid, and it's a lot of work be done also in terms of how to process, how to do the governance of emission reduction transfers. However, there are definitely some major differences, and from our experience, the major difference is the role of the governments is completely different. Now, under the Paris Agreement, the governments, they are judged by how they reach their NDCs. And Article 6 now comes with corresponding adjustments, and countries, they have to make sure that there will be no overselling. They have to make sure that Article 6 activities do not compete with their own policy measures instituted under the NDC framework domestically, but they also have to ensure that national priorities are that they concur with national policies. And this, of course, makes the act of an authorization much more heavy, and brings about the responsibility and also accountability. And this is actually what we see is the main difference, that the ownership of the governments is much more in the forefront. And we are very happy also to be able to work with a country like Peru, where we really feel that this is extremely well prepared and advanced. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much, Misha. And we're going to turn now to Jan, who's joining us virtually. Jan, you provide a biased perspective really here as a representative of an ambitious company who takes climate action very seriously. So Coop is taking considerable steps to improve its sustainability and to reduce its operational carbon footprint. And it would be great if you could share a bit more about how you see the role of markets within that and of Article 6 cooperation.
Yes, thanks for having me today. I guess you can hear me? Yeah, hopefully. So, yeah, let me share a few thoughts on this matter. I mean, Coop Switzerland very much welcomes pioneering and high standard projects for internationally transferable mitigation outcomes. And I think for us, it's very important that these standards under Article 6, for example, protect host countries' NDCs and prevent double counting, as well as double claiming of mitigation outcomes. I mean, in our view, this mechanism is part of a larger, more comprehensive set of measures. Climate protection must take place quickly and on a broad front in our perspective, and accordingly projects, including those under Article 6, are very important to support this very huge task, right? I mean, maximum efforts will be needed in the coming years to effectively advance climate protection. And in our view, every high-quality project represents an important contribution to this. So we encourage all parties to adhere to the high standards of sustainable development, environmental integrity, and respect of human rights for credible and effective climate action, because this is very important for us. I mean, especially in this ongoing transition phase from Kyoto to Paris. I mean, Coop Switzerland is a leading Swiss retailer, and sustainability is part of our everyday life within our company, and it's a very integral part of our business activities. And yes, it has been strategically anchored in our articles of association since 1973 and in our current mission statements. But I mean, for us, it's really important to implement projects now with a very high quality, and because we are oriented on a longer term, you know, vision, and with aspirational multi-year sustainability targets and an ambitious climate strategy, which is going to be SBTI compatible in the future. And we are working together with WWF Switzerland. They are like co-developing our approach and challenge us. And for us, it's very important to take climate action now with a very high quality. And so we intend to finance climate protection projects in cooperation with WWF Switzerland as part of our voluntary climate engagement, but within the framework of bilateral agreements, for example. And we are very much want to implement a project which might result in one of the first voluntary and transferable mitigation outcome that is Paris compatible with a corresponding adjustment. And this is just our way forward. It's a clear way forward. It's a credible way forward. It's credible for our customers. It's credible for our stakeholders. And I think it's very imperative for the future of our children as well. And this is really it really is a motivation for Coop Switzerland. So yeah, I think we seek to maximize benefits of our engagement, and for us it's very important to have this market oriented approach, for example, with Gold Standard and WWF Switzerland, and which has clear boundaries and processes, and this gives us security. And I think it's very beneficial for every actor within this framework of this transitioning framework from Kyoto to Paris, and we are very much motivated. It's an intrinsic motivation, basically, to climate protection, and that's yeah, it's very important also to hear this panel discussion and to just further develop this whole approach of corresponding adjustments and of the fusion of voluntary and involuntary markets. It's very much helpful in our opinion. And yes, I mean, to conclude, we hope and expect that the bilateral agreement, for example, between Switzerland and Peru, is a precedent for negotiations and agreements on rules for implementing Article 6 during this COP. And you may be aware, yeah, I mean, we would rather have very strict rules and clear rules than bad rules. It's very helpful for us and for the planet. And yes, I'm concluding now and handing over again. Thanks you.
Great, thank you very much for that, Jan. You mentioned there your cooperation, your partnership with WWF Switzerland, and we're going to turn now to Katrine Oswald, who is Senior Manager for Nature and Climate at WWF Switzerland, who's joining us virtually. So Katrine, you've been supporting Coop's efforts as part of a long-standing partnership. And at the same time, WWF Switzerland has been an advocate for responsible Paris-aligned action by companies. It'd be great if you could share a bit more about what that means for WWF in practice and how Article 6 fits in with that. You're still muted, Katrine.
Okay, I hope that works better. Thank you. Sorry for the technical issues. First of all, thank you for your invitation to participate in this panel. And thank you, Hugh, for your question. I would first like to put that in a broader context, which has been mentioned before by Margaret and others. First of all, WWF asks all countries and companies to follow a robust mitigation hierarchy focused on real and 1.5 degree aligned reductions. And for credible and just corporate climate action, companies then need to address remaining greenhouse gas emissions, and they should put a price on these based on the social costs of carbon. And this is, again, beyond their 1.5 degree aligned reductions. Then once these emissions are priced, the financial commitment should then be used to support a broad range of climate actions along two pathways. And this is where I'm responding to your question about Article 6. So the first pathway is the investment in the voluntary carbon market with mandatory corresponding adjustments. And for this pathway, we welcome the pioneering cooperative approaches under Article 6.2 of the Paris Agreement, ensuring high ambition for reducing emissions in all countries involved, while preventing double counting and double claiming of mitigation outcomes. We emphasize the importance of adhering to high standards of environmental integrity and safeguarding human rights, including rights of indigenous peoples and maximizing benefits for sustainable development in all rules, in all procedures and projects under the bilateral agreements. WWF believes that if companies want to own and claim the mitigation outcomes of their foreign projects, this pathway is the most credible way to go for. However, WWF also sees much value in the second pathway, the voluntary carbon finance, where private actors support climate action projects without owning the mitigation outcomes and therefore claiming the contribution only. So this basically helps the host countries to better achieve their climate targets and increase those in future. So to get back to your question on Coop, WWF welcomes the approach our long-standing corporate partner is taking based on the prerequisite of an encompassing and ambitious sustainability and climate strategy and actions. We support Coop in using the voluntary market with mandatory corresponding adjustments under the bilateral agreements, which is the first pathway I mentioned earlier. This allows for some of the first voluntary projects that follow the Paris Agreement. And thanks to the corresponding adjustments, the achieved mitigation outcomes become additional over and above the sum of all submitted NDCs. And Coop would really own the achieved mitigation outcomes. This is today, unfortunately, not the case with what the voluntary carbon market is doing. And to conclude, I can only resonate what Jan has been saying. We also hope that these bilateral agreements set a precedent for agreements on the rule book for implementing Article 6. Because we need climate action now, and we need security, legal security, and frameworks for this now. And again, and as Jan said, as you may be aware, also WWF would rather have no rules than bad rules. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katrine. Thank you for sharing your views on that. We're going to turn now to Florian Eichhold from Atmosfair. We've heard a variety of perspectives so far, from governments to standards, civil society buyers, and we're now going to hear from a project developer who is at the forefront of securing authorizations under Article 6. So Florian, turning to you virtually, Atmosfair is the first project developer to announce that it has received letters of authorization under Article 6 from not one, but two host countries for programs that will generate carbon credits for use in the voluntary carbon market. It's always a risk to move first, but why has Atmosfair done so, and what have you learned along the way?
Yeah, good afternoon. Hello, everybody there in Glasgow and virtually. Hello, colleagues, distinguished panelists. First, some introductory remarks. I think it is clear that the voluntary carbon market has to align with the Paris Agreement. The market environment has changed. We are not living anymore in a Kyoto world. We are living in a Paris world that has and it is all about cooperation and ambition raising towards the final global objective of 1.5 degrees. So the voluntary carbon market has to serve this purpose. And we see just what Katrine told us, the guidance from WWF, but also other experts and scientists tell us that voluntary carbon market can only contribute to this Paris objective if corresponding adjustments are introduced. When you want to use units for offsetting purposes. Otherwise, you have double counting. So it was clear that a project developer like Atmosfair has to find a way to work this out, even though there was a lot of gaps in guidance from the multilateral negotiations. So we started engaging with over 20 host country governments bilaterally to discuss the possibility of working together to avoid double counting. And we advanced very well with the governments of Rwanda and Nepal, where we agreed on the introduction of corresponding adjustments for our projects that are implemented in these countries. And this is, let's say, we did a press release about our cooperation last week with Nepal in order to show the market that it is possible to find ways to introduce corresponding adjustments. We see a lot of fear in the voluntary carbon market that the pathways safeguarding environmental integrity are too difficult and they slow down the expected growth. But the voluntary carbon market is all about trust. It is built on trust and confidence of the investors, of the donors. And if we want to maintain this trust, we need to introduce corresponding adjustments. There's no way around. So we heard from Jan Coop is demanding these types of credits, and we heard this morning on a panel discussion at the German pavilion from BMW, for example, that they are only purchasing units that are backed up with corresponding adjustments and where double counting is avoided. So there is a demand. And of course, there's a variety of possibilities. It's a non-regulated market, and it's about the responsibility of every actor. But Atmosfair CEO Dietrich Borkhagen told us that he estimates that half of the market, at least half of the market, will go the way of high integrity with corresponding adjustments. So of course that's not enough, and we have to work hard on getting the entire market on this pathway of high integrity. But for companies, the voluntary carbon market with corresponding adjustments is the opportunity to contribute with their funds to closing the gap towards 1.5 degrees. And this is what corporates around the world that take environmental integrity serious want to achieve with their money. They want to do more than countries are able to do. They want to raise ambition. They want to go more into high-hanging fruit projects. They want to address the difficult to achieve abatement opportunities with their funds. They want to do more. They want to accelerate towards 1.5 degrees. And well, we hope that with our agreements with Nepal and Rwanda, we can send some signs that these pathways of high integrity are not only a vision, but it is possible. And we are working now with these countries to go ahead in the implementation. And we are very happy to share lessons learned with partners and other actors in the market to benefit also from our work. Thank you, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Florian, and thanks to all of the panelists there. Just picking up on some of the things that Florian said there, it feels like we may be at a bit of a turning point at this COP. There are, as Florian said, announcements this morning about companies interested in buying adjusted units. We have authorizations coming through. We have models which for the past year actually have been set up by Switzerland, by Peru, and by others. And we hope that we do have at the end of this COP as well an Article 6 deal, an Article 6 framework, which really allows this all to move forward. And then one of the other things which has come through on several of the presentations so far as well is the 1.5 degrees, where we really as well hope that this COP is a turning point there. And I think it's come through quite clearly that by investing beyond the NDC, by using Article 6 and having units which are adjusted for by the host country, that's a way in which companies can really invest in action which goes beyond the level of NDCs and helps to close that gap for 1.5. We have about 25 minutes left, and if anyone is watching virtually, you're welcome to send through questions on the COP26 platform, and we'll do our best to answer them. But for now, I just wanted to pick up on one of the other themes which I've heard coming through this event, and to ask those here in the room to give some answers, and then those joining virtually on the panel, I think if you signal, you may be able to provide answers as well. My first question is, when Article 6 is talked about, it's often in the terms of markets, but what Article 6 actually says is this is voluntary cooperation. And it feels to me like this is one of the things that's really come through in this event, that we're really talking here about cooperation. So cooperation between Switzerland and Peru, cooperation between buyers and governments, cooperation across the board. And I'm really interested in hearing from some of those who've moved first about their sense of that and how this feels different to the past, and how this feels like a cooperative approach. So maybe over to one of Switzerland or Peru if you wish to answer.
Thank you very much for the question, and definitely I think you just you have made it to the point that definitely this is ongoing cooperation. Peru and Switzerland have been working together for many years now. There is a lot of support from Switzerland to Peru, and we welcome it. And definitely this is a way also of reflecting the importance and the nature of this cooperation in both countries. So definitely this is part of a bigger picture of a bigger cooperation between both countries. Obviously, this is a work by doing, and we are working together with a lot of innovation and creativity to address the different challenges that we face related to this process, because it's new. And all of this that is new obviously cannot necessarily move so fast forward, but definitely the idea is to go step by step together in order to address those issues and to really have outcomes related to the global goal that both countries consider is important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I may also just add on that, very much echoing, of course, what Milagros is saying. I think it is truly a cooperation. We have experienced that throughout the discussions with Peru, building this together. It has, cooperation embedded in every article of our agreement, I would say. One point I would like to highlight, while it is a cooperation between governments, the innovative thing here is that we create a framework that has a cooperative spirit, but it enables any public or private entity to implement it and turn it into action. So thereby, this cooperative framework allows also for mobilizing private investments in climate protection projects and unlock, additional means for climate action.
Thanks. Yes, and if I may add a little bit to that, and Veronica did touch upon the need for private sector and other actors to join in. I think it's really important to highlight that, because all the building blocks have been built in the last 2 decades through the voluntary carbon markets. The private sectors or project developers know-hows and learnings from dealing with the most vulnerable communities, the stakeholder engagement, all those mechanisms and learnings are there. And I think we need to really maximize those learnings and apply it in a most rigorous way in this new era coming towards us, or the new era that we're entering in. So I think that's an important element, and that's where the standards and existing project developers can really contribute and support the cooperative approach between the governments to raise that ambition.
And Misha, I know that the KliK Foundation does a lot of work both with project developers and with governments. I'm interested in your view on this and the idea of cooperation in Article 6.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about cooperation. This is actually what we do. I would say we are kind of a facilitator. Currently, we are laying in a corporate spirit the tracks for something that has to or will become hopefully avenues in the future. We are supporting project developers currently with over $1 million in various to develop the design documents of these activities, because this involves a lot of work, and also work that is not clear that it will end in the end in ITMOS, because the rules are not clear. So no project developer is willing to take this risk, at least for the compliance market. And I'm extremely happy to see that companies like Atmosphere start to kick off on themselves. And of course, we are even more cooperating with the governments to identify those areas where the activity really makes sense, do not compete, and do not are concurrent with the priorities of the countries, and also with the requirements of the Swiss government. And I'm sure going forward things will get clearer, streamlined, standardized, and as we saw in the CDM, the rules will mature. We will see what works and what does not work, maybe for each and every country individually, because every country is unique, but it's really all about cooperation.
Thanks, Misha. And over to Florian now, virtually. I can't remember the exact number, but it was at least a dozen host countries you said that you've been speaking to as part of your work over the past year. So this idea really hits home for you. So I'm interested to hear what you think as well.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to congratulate Peru and Switzerland about your cooperation, especially Peru setting up the registry and setting up the infrastructure. That makes the country attractive for investments in mitigation opportunities from our perspective. So I think what we should do from Atmosfair is to look into these existing frameworks and see how we can cooperate here. And I would also like to invite you to from Switzerland to look into our cooperations with Nepal and Rwanda, and showcase some opportunities here for cooperation. So I think that is what we are doing here is a kind of kickstarting really the Article 6 and the new voluntary carbon market. And I would like to add also that a lot of cooperation on the implementation process is now required. We need a lot of support for host country governments to put the infrastructure in place. We need to exchange lessons learned. We need to provide frameworks for knowledge exchange, and especially also about technology transfer that these projects can deliver within a country and amongst several countries.
Very much Thank you, Florian. I mean, when you just take a step back and look at who we have on the panel here, we have representatives of the governments who introduced the first bilateral agreement under Article 6, the first standard to be putting in place provisions to enable Article 6 cooperation, the first project developer to have received letters of authorization for the voluntary carbon market, one of the first buyers to be interested in investing and seeking adjusted units. And so it really is a group of pioneers here, I think, on this panel and in this room here. And when you think about what people are really trying to do, I mean, this would have been a lot easier, I think, if we'd have had Article 6 rules in place a few years ago. And in practice, what everyone here is trying to do is build a train track while the map is being adjusted in terms of the Article 6 guidance. We don't really know where the map will end up, but everyone here is bold enough to try to build that train track and to take us forward. And I think it's very bold, and I think there's a lot that can be learned by other governments, other project developers, other buyers who are looking to follow and learn from some of the work which has been done by those on this panel. And so I'm interested in whether anyone has any experiences that they would like to share, any lessons from the work that's been done so far on what can be well replicated by others, and where is standardization really valuable? Because I think it's in all of our interests for this to take off and for it to move beyond Switzerland and Peru and to really encompass other countries, other buyers around the world. So I'm interested in some of the lessons and some of the areas for standardization.
Thank you very much. Let me start there that certainly what we do here, we're learning every day. And I've just also, sorry, a little bit distracted because I've seen a question came in through the platform. So I'm trying to listen and to read at the same time. I think one point is that we have built this cooperative framework with Peru in a stepwise approach. We have set framework conditions, and every mitigation activity still requires authorization by both governments. So when it comes down to the concrete activities, this will be reviewed by both governments, checked against eligibility criteria, and then decided for authorization. And I think today we are not yet at that point. We hope soon these activities will be coming forward. But at that time, these will be reviewed and consulted appropriately. We hope, of course, that we will learn from our engagement every day. It's fair to say the first ones out also may try something that we find better answers the next way around. But we are very pleased to have a dear partner with us going this journey, and we are very pleased to actually seeing that very similar frameworks work for a wide variety of different countries. It is known that Switzerland by now has concluded along the agreement with Peru and the very same setup and general characteristics of the cooperation. Agreements with Ghana, Senegal, Georgia, and we are very soon going to be signing with Vanuatu, Dominica, and also very progressed with Thailand and other countries. So it seems that the general setup, this stepwise approach that allows every country to still define its own national frameworks, set its own criteria and consultation procedures, might be one that suits various countries and might be hopefully a precedent or a good learning ground, at least, for also a wider international solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I echo the remarks made by Veronica, and definitely for us, some of the work and the lessons learned definitely come from different work that we have been doing on the ground. It is important to understand the different initiatives and the different needs and priorities that different people in Peru aim and need to support their livelihoods. So definitely that is one of the issues that we need to address as a country as a whole. And one of these is to support and promote participatory processes. And this is definitely something that we are doing now, currently, especially in the issue related to the registry. The registry, as I mentioned, has been or is being developed now. It's a work in progress. And we have done a first round of comments from this participatory process that has included different stakeholders, such as private sector, NGOs, and especially indigenous peoples. So that is important because we need to strengthen capacities at the national level, at the subnational level, at the local level, so everybody can understand specifically what this registry will imply and how these procedures will be established and in accordance with national legislation. So I think that our main takeaway, our main work and what drives us through this process is definitely the participatory systems, considering that Peru is a very diverse country and that we need to engage all our stakeholders. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that answer. And I mean, because what you said there was very related to a question which we've had, which has come in, which is about local participation in this event, but then also more broadly in Article 6. And I think you just talked there to consultation, inclusivity in your Article 6 cooperation. And for this event, I mean, it's with regret that we aren't able to host this in an inclusive way with an audience here, but we're glad people can watch this event at least. And we would have liked to have had a wider audience for this one in person. And I'm going to pass over to Maggie now, Margaret, to provide an answer to that question, but then also maybe to talk a little bit more about gold standards requirements around local consultation as well.
That was going to be my first learning after 5-6 days at COP. I think as a standard representing the highest quality in the financial mechanisms, I think one of the key questions I get in panel discussions is, where's the local voices? I got a question yesterday saying, if you have to sit together with a stakeholder group today to address some of the gaps, who would that be? And I said Farmers Association. So if we have agriculture projects that we review and we support, we rarely hear from the farmers' voices how this project is driving impact and how it's changing their practices. So at the end of the day, this market mechanism is there to drive bigger impact, to drive our ambition to achieve our climate goal. So at the end of the day, the people, the beneficiaries, the people who are involved in these projects are the main actors. So I do agree with the question that's coming in, that we should have local voices central to these processes, and definitely next time we organize a meeting, we will bring that voice in. Second sort of lesson learning is the need for capacity building. I've been talking to a lot of the sort of regional alliances where they're developing projects. Is the rigor that Article 6 mechanism is trying to achieve is great, but how do we build capacity at a local NGO level? That's a lot of challenges I hear from project developers. And third sort of learning, and I really take it back with me, back to Geneva, is how do we learn from the lessons that come out of the voluntary carbon market? Because we can't dismiss the nearly 2 decades long efforts in driving technology innovation and an amount of impact and carbon finance that supported the most vulnerable communities around the world. So how do we take those lessons and integrate that, enhance that in getting our standard ready for the Article 6 or the Paris-aligned era? And finally, the need for digitization. We talked about cooperation, we talked about, transparency, higher ambition, but the barrier to, there's high barrier to entry. So how do we reduce the cost? How do we reduce the complexity? How do we make it more transparent? How do we enhance the data quality through digitization? So as a standard, Gold Standard's committed with its partners, and we just launched a digitization platform working with Climate Check and IOTA Foundation to digitize this ecosystem and digitize our standard component so that we can help reducing those sort of major barriers for local communities, local NGOs that want to create an innovative project and access the market mechanisms to make it easier for them. So I'm taking away a lot of learnings from this discussion, but also from the general COP26, and hopefully our standard will reflect these going forward.
Great, thank you, Maggie. Misha, anything to add? And then while speaking, if either any of our virtual participants want to add, if they could just raise their hands as well so we can come to you.
Yeah, it's difficult to add something. I mean, of course, echo a lot, and I'm very much sharing the vision of Maggie on digitization. I think this is really we need a breakthrough here to bring down transaction costs and bring the money to those who really need and basically do the mitigation outcomes. Now, again, it's our approach is to trying to turn, with respect to standardization, we try to, or replication, we try to turn learnings into standardized processes and procedures. But most prominently, I think what we need currently are robust, transparent, and predictable rules, not only from the UNFCCC, but also from the local governments. And building on that, we can really move ahead much faster, and also we view on the replication of works and whatnot. And we are absolutely aware of our responsibility that we carry now in this very early phase to do it right, and we are absolutely committed to do so and to produce a system which is inclusive, because only that way it will stick in the Paris Agreement.
Great, thank you, Misha. And going over to Jan now virtually.
Thank you. I just want to quickly follow up on what Maggie and Misha said. I mean, we need clarity, legal clarity, planning certainty, simplicity. We also need a clear management language to promote climate protection among companies. In my view, a uniform carbon market is absolutely necessary for this. And the bilateral forget about it, agreement between Peru and Switzerland is very exciting from our point of view. And I mean, we would like to keep up the pace, maybe also increase the pace to gather experience in order to implement our climate protection commitment in the best and most ambitious possible manner. I mean, what is happening now in Switzerland among companies is they want to engage. But we need clarity, and we want to invest in next year and in 2023 and 2024. But now I think we just need to go forward, united for climate protection, and it's really so exciting for us. This bilateral agreement, yes, to get experience and to build our climate strategy around this experience as well. And I'm really happy about this agreement, and I want to thank everyone who was involved in getting to this point. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jan. We have just 4 minutes left, so I just wanted to ask one final question to any presenters here who wants to take it in a minute or so. So Jan talked there about needing to move fast, and we're at the beginning of this bilateral agreement and of other ones. Would anyone like to say in 1 minute what success would look like in 2030? So looking at 9 years from here, what would success look like? What would a good outcome or a good way on the path towards net zero be at that point here? Milagros.
Thank you. I think success for the case of Peru implies that we have definitely triggered and gone to the specificity of addressing sustainable development. These type of agreements, for us, we wish that they can link the different opportunities that exist in Peru to engage with sustainable development. Supporting the livelihoods of the communities, of the people that live and that can be supported through these processes is definitely important. And we also believe that it can, if Peru can give an example of giving legal certainty legal security of this process, clarity, transparency, and addressing the different issues such as double counting, such as all of these processes, and especially setting a clear example of how do we address social and environmental safeguards in this process will definitely be something that we will be very happy to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Veronica.
Thank you very much. I think success would certainly be if we close the emission gap to 1.5 degrees, and anything we can do, the earlier, the better. So I think if we look back in the year 2030 to today's conference of the parties or this year, I think it would be a success saying that we did not undo the ambition and integral rules set and enshrined in the Paris Agreement. And secondly, that we wholeheartedly embrace the paradigm shift that is enshrined in that Paris Agreement. And I found it very encouraging that today we see early movers going forward, embracing that paradigm shift, starting now with the focus on the Article 6, implementing this, safeguarding NDCs, avoiding double counting, and maximizing the benefits for local communities. And I'm particularly encouraged also to hear the voices at this side event and also earlier today at an event of the German Pavilion from the private sector, saying that also in the voluntary carbon markets, in the voluntary engagements of companies, they want to embrace this paradigm shift. This requires governments and private sector to work together, make it happen, to get it going, and I hope we get there and we look back to this year and say this was the start of it.
Great, thank you very much, Veronica. And I think that's actually a really good place to close the meeting as we get to 2:30 GMT. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to all of the presenters here, to the Vice Minister who opened the event, to our representatives from the governments of Peru and Switzerland, to Gold Standard, KliK Foundation, and the panelists who joined us virtually as well. I think there are some key themes which have come through in here. The urgency and the potential for this cooperation to support higher ambition and close that emission gap to 1.5 degrees. The element of cooperation, which extends to those in this room, but also far beyond it as well, to local communities and those who are affected on the ground. And that's really what matters here, I think, getting this right. And I think that's what success looks like, as we've heard from our speakers here. So with that, I'd like to say thank you again. Thanks to everyone who was watching this virtually. And we wish you a good rest of your day. Thank you.